Let's get to the imposter syndrome that we're going to talk about. I think this is pretty common. We all sometimes think of the quote unquote achievements, even using the term quote unquote sounds imposter syndrome, right? And do we feel proud, or sometimes we feel accomplished, or we feel like, it's not me, it's just sheer luck, or it's just my boss must be out of his mind, or it's just blah, blah, blah. This is very common. This is the inner talk. And we all experience some kind of promotion or accolade or raise, but deep inside, sometimes we have that dread, we have that fear that one day the cover will be blown. Someone will find out that we are just a fraud. This is something very interesting because I first heard the term imposter syndrome on a morning edition radio show when I was driving. It's on NPR. When I heard that, I heard the whole coverage. I was like, wow, this was spot on. This was exactly what I feel. So I did a little bit of research and feel like, wow, I didn't know this is a term. And there's a lot of people talking about it. And actually, a lot of people are experiencing it. So we're going to have a little deep dive today to figure out what exactly is imposter syndrome. So we will, again, go back to the dictionary definition. It is the overwhelming feeling that you do not deserve your success. This only happens to those who are already experiencing or achieved certain level of success. So it is a specific thing that happened to those achievers. What gives me the right? Why me? Or how come? And your biggest fear is that one day you will be exposed as a fraud, or everything you did was a lie, that you so afraid that you will be exposed. Especially this happened when you started a new job or you started a new identity, let's say from traditional 9 to 5 to an entrepreneur, or you go into college, you become a PhD candidate or whatnot. You change your environment and you receive a reward or a promotion or taking on extra responsibilities. A lot of times, those are the moment that you get struck with the imposter syndrome. People who experience this, I just wanted to name a few. Albert Einstein, famous physicist, right? And John Steinbeck, the author of The Great Roth. He also won a Nobel Prize for that. And Meryl Streep, she won the Oscar, the Best Actress in 1979 in the movie Kramer versus Kramer. At the time, she was only 30 years old, I believe. She was playing a mom in the movie, a mom about to experience divorce. However, she was not even a mom in her real life. So she told the media that she actually felt an imposter syndrome for many years. And Sheryl Sandberg of the Facebook, very famous lady, very famous icon of the modern day C-suite women opinion leaders. And also Serena Williams of the tennis, she experienced that. And Tom Hanks, the great actor, multi-Oscar winner. Michelle Obama, former first lady, and many, many more. They all experience this. We can actually see the pattern of it. The cause of the imposter syndrome. One cause could be mixed labels at childhood. For example, you may be very good at something and very poor at other things. So it's like a mixed labels. Or you experience or you have experienced some kind of oppressor in your life, be it hardship, be it a very hard competition or examinations or kind of like conditions, and you survived. You were the only one or very few that survived, and you have that survivor guilt. You feel like, oh, I don't deserve it because most people are not even here. And also the conflict evidence country, like you're the only one in your family tree that end up in this position or end up in this college or had the privilege of this certain status or whatnot. So those are the possible causes. I have found out that minorities or underrepresented group, underdogs, oddballs, black sheep of the family, or dark horses tend to experience imposter syndrome more. What does that mean? For example, if you are the only or very few female in a traditionally male-dominated career world, you are more likely to experience the imposter syndrome. Or if you are the very few person of this minority background, say if you're a C-suite leader and you are the only one, and then you probably will experience some sort of imposter syndrome one way or another. I remember when I started my career in the speech pathology world, when I was in grad school, I was the first international student and I was the only man. At one time, I feel very proud. At the same time, I feel very, very challenged. I feel like there's no other references. I feel like I was an imposter through and through. So lack of reference in the cohort, because if you are just one of the many, then you are not likely to experience imposter syndrome. But you feel like, oh, I'm the lucky one. That's why that feeds you that evidence. Okay, I'm the lucky one. It's just merely luck, because there's no reference out there. And also statistically underrepresented. You are not there. And majority of the people are this group, or majority of the people are this education background, and you are not typical. And compared to your typical group with the same conditions, you are totally overachieved. All those things feed the evidence of you feel like, oh, I'm just lucky. I'm just a fraud or whatever. So if we're looking at the results, Albert Einstein, he was a Jewish at the time. He escaped the Nazi persecution back in World War II. He came to America. Meryl Streep, at the time, she was very young, and Kramer versus Kramer was her first movie, and she won an Oscar. And Sheryl Sandberg was in Silicon Valley, and at least at the time, there's not many female C-suite leaders in Silicon Valley, at least not many famous ones. And Serena Williams, we know that she is a traditionally tennis or golf. They are Caucasian male-dominated sports. And Tom Hanks, maybe he has his story too. And Michelle Obama, obviously, she is the first lady of the first African-American president. Her book, in her memoir that she described when she went to Princeton, she experienced that very vividly. So those are the contributing causes that labels, and you're the very underrepresented, and you're oddballs and black sheep or dark horses or whatever. And then those things could contribute to your imposter syndrome complexes. IS, imposter syndrome, can be linked to other areas of self-doubt, such as fear of success, fear of failure, and self-sabotage. And fear of failure is pretty much self-explanatory, but why fear of success? And believe it or not, a lot of people fear of success more than the fear of failure, because fear of success is that you will feel guilty. You will feel like, oh, my friends, my family, or my coworkers, they would even enjoy the same level of success, and I will be the only one. I don't want to feel left behind. I don't want to feel distant from them. So that's why subconsciously we are avoiding success. This is one of the funky things. You wanted to push, because when someone is successful, you would subconsciously feel there could be more responsibilities, more sacrifices, aka losing more time, personal time, more commitment or whatnot. So that could also push us of fearing the success. Fear of failure is very understandable, and it can be immobilizing. It can cause us to do nothing and therefore resist moving forward. And self-sabotage, believe it or not, a lot of successful people actually get into this cycle of they achieve something and then they start to self-sabotage because their identity hasn't changed. And once they achieve something, their underlying identity or their ego will try to persuade them, hey, what are you doing? Why you deserve this? And they just started to do something stupid, and they do something very destructive. And that happens to a lot. There's one book called Cyber Cybernetics. I would highly recommend it. It's a very important book in the personal development history. It basically tells you your self-image and your perception of self, your identity, has a lot to do with your outer world and also your inner world. And it was discovered by this plastic surgeon, not a traditional psychologist or a psychiatrist. If the imposter syndrome is not addressed properly, it can lead to people stop taking on new tasks or roles or challenges, meaning they wanted to stay in the comfort zone. They wanted to stay in this smaller shelter. So they do not want to take more responsibility, because more responsibilities higher chances of getting exposed, higher chances of failure, higher chances of your quote unquote fraud identity will be discovered. So by nature, we do not want to take more responsibilities. And also, surely self-confidence will be compromised, and we will be in a constant cycle of self-doubt and questioning our previous achievements or successes. Also, accompanying with stress, anxiety, exhaustion, burnout, or even depression. This is very common. And those we know that once we are in those negative emotional state, our health and well-being, relationship, or career prospects could be severely impacted. So do I or do we suffer imposter syndrome? Here's several checkers. This could be a very severe psychological label, or it could be just a temporary psychological thing. Sometimes we feeling inadequacy and self-doubt. It's like, I'm not worthy, or I don't deserve this, or I cannot do this. And also, another thing is avoiding responsibility, just like we said, fear of success. And that leads to the potential exposure of our identity, so to speak. So that is fearing a failure and procrastination. And also fearing judgment and discovery. And that is a very funny thing because judgment, they said, could play a very big role in our daily lives. And it's like being haunted by this demon, constant fear of discovery, and haunted by the fear that you aren't good enough and people will find out that you're not good enough. Then this leads to us to try to avoid exposure, try not to reveal our true selves, and avoid voicing our opinion as much as possible. This happens a lot in the career field as well. And also, we become this person that denying our own success. We constantly engage in this negative self-talk. Oh, my previous things was just a sheer luck, and what gives me the right to speak, or why should people listen to me? I'm just this, I'm merely this, right? Well, I was just lucky and got a lot of help. On the surface, this sounds like being humble and modest, but it could really well be lack of confidence, and it could be just imposter syndrome is acting up. Also, sometimes if you are in the position of leadership, of responsibility, you also wanted to keep an eye on your team members who are struggling with the feeling of inadequacy, aka imposter syndrome, especially someone you just recently promoted or someone you just given more responsibility. They could be struggling with this too. If you can share with them your vulnerability, hey, I know you're feeling, I experienced this when I was at your position, when I was in your shoes, I experienced this, I know exactly how you feel. And then you could actually build a very constructive communication relationship. So people in your team could sometimes say, well, I'm not sure I know what I'm talking about, but that is not modest. That is not being humble. Or it might just be me, but could be like they're not sure. They're not being assertive. They're just trying to put themselves in a position that it is safe. It is less of exposure. So how are we going to overcome this? Number one, this is very important. We wanted to acknowledge it. This is true. This is real. We don't want to avoid it. We want to accept it. Accept and acknowledge your feelings. My favorite therapeutic way by far is the journal, because you wanted to keep this journal only accessible to you and by you. Obviously, you don't want to share this journal with anybody. So that creates this safe space. You can just write down your true feelings. So keeping a journal. Journal doesn't need to be like some people may say, wow, you just need to write down your goals and the motivation and all stuff and all that. Actually, sometimes write down those quote unquote ridiculous or silly self-talking, subconscious talking, your inner world languages. They are very therapeutic. One thing I would like to share recently, I was watching on HBO Max, there's Harry Potter movie series. I was watching this with my wife. And in Harry Potter, I believe is the second episode, the teacher was trying to teach them how to deal with their fears. So all they do is they conjure up all things that they fear most, be it a giant spider or a ghost and whatnot. So when they conjure up those things, the demons or the monsters and whatnot, teacher asks them to cast the spell, ridiculous. That is the spell, ridiculous. And then that monster or that spider turn into a funny thing. Like all the limbs of the spiders has this roller skater turns into a purely laughable matter. So maybe when we write it down, we're not trying to say something magical or esoteric, but you can give it affirmation. You can give it a command. This is ridiculous. This is preposterous. This is totally laughable. Why would I think like that? Right? And then you can reconstruct your inner working, your subconscious thinking pattern. Wow, this is totally ridiculous. Doesn't make sense. Why would I think like that? And instead, you can use the affirmation to replace that thinking pattern. And that way, your feelings can be actually channeled. And also talk to others and reach out and talk to people you trust. This is also very therapeutic. And also, if we know sometimes we inevitably and unavoidably have some kind of a pattern or negative self-talk, we can have this quick response plan, because it always started with a trigger, like, oh, even a look from my boss or a comment from my colleague's email. It could be a trigger. And we started to doubt ourselves. We started to have that negative self-talk. In Harry Potter, again, that the Dementors are the monster that's sucking all your joy. So what Harry Potter did was casting a spell, and that Dementors will go away. So when you identify your self-fulfilling negative self-talk, you wanted to immediately put in place some kind of like a mechanism to counter-react. So instead of totally devoured by those things, we have something put in place. And also think of yourself in the third person. Instead of thinking, why did I do that? Try thinking, why did they do that? Why did this person do that? And we can put ourselves in a very objective view to reveal this thing without the tanglement of emotion. And also, you want to understand your strengths and weaknesses. Sometimes when we are in the negative self-talk and emotions, we tend to forget and invalidate all our achievements or our kudos in the past. So just like the HR, just like a good mechanic, inventorize, make a list, make a tally of your strengths and weaknesses. You do a SWOT study if you must. Naturally, your confidence will be built just by doing that. However, those do not nullify the fact that when you are in a new position or when you are in a new environment, you do need to learn a lot of new things. There's a lot of things that you truly are not familiar with. Of course, that's when we need to set up extra time. We need to budget and allocate extra energy and time for us to sharpen the knife. Also, we all have the perfectionism tendencies. We wanted to overcome it. But that is to really, truly set some realistic goals. Goal setting, the acronym SAMART, is good for the outcome goals. But in terms of process goals, we wanted to set very realistic and achievable progress goals. When you have the clear process goals, all you need to do is implement. And that leads to the check mark of your to-do list. And also, we know that mistakes are common. Sometimes we experience setbacks. Sometimes we experience plateaus. Sometimes we experienced lukewarm situations. It's totally normal. Yeah, we just need to do an analysis and also own your successes. We wanted to have an internal locus of control. Tony Robbins once said, what determines the quality of our life really is our decisions. And our current life are actually shaped by the hundreds of thousands of decisions that you made. So we wanted to have the accountability and the responsibility to own our decisions from today onward. Thus, we can take the responsibility for your achievements as well as your future achievements or failures. So we wanted to own it. Success is the ownership. And also, we wanted to celebrate and enjoy our successes too. It is the same thing as count the blessings. We have a record of positive feedback and praise that you receive, and also the things that you did. In other words, being grateful, not just only looking at the things that haven't yet achieved. Impostor syndrome is a very self-fulfilling pattern. And a lot of times we doubt ourselves. It's very natural. It happens. Yeah, you look at all those celebrities, all those successful people, to a certain degree, they are all against the odds. They're not supposed to be there. That's why they feel like a fraud. So here are some practical tools that I would like to share with you. When we feel like an imposter or when we feel like a fraud, we wanted to list your achievements, however small and big, and also learn to accept your compliment. Do not mix with modest or humble with imposter syndrome. Just simply say thank you. And also adopt a growth mindset. It is very different between I can't do that versus I cannot do that yet. When you're in the new position, of course, there's a lot of things that haven't been unlocked yet. You just need to spend time, do your homework. But by the time, you will be able to do it. And also, we can ask for help for sure. And most importantly, embrace, channel, and ground your energy. The energy here mostly is negative emotions, like your fears, like your anxieties, and all that. They're all energies. It's pretty much like the thunder, like the lightning. We have the lightning rod to channel, to ground the electricity, to turn electricity into other form of energy. You just wanted to catch the energy, squeeze it, and then channel it for your advantage. Fear is never bad, I would say. Fear is a very clear indication that those are areas that you are not comfortable with. And believe it or not, the best way to avoid imposter syndrome is to stay in the mediocrity or stay in the comfort zone. Then you will never experience imposter syndrome. But we know that this is not a good advice. There's nothing wrong with being mediocre, is that when you have so much to offer to the world, when you have so much potential that is untapped, that's total waste. And the imposter syndrome is truly normal. And it is an essential part of the hero's journey. If you are familiar with Joseph Campbell's work, you know, if you watch any Hollywood movie, it's all a hero's journey. In the beginning, this hero, be it Batman, Superman, whatever Marvel icons, they are so doubtful. They're so suspicious of their ability. And then they unwillingly accept it and they become congruent of their abilities. All heroes in their own journey experience this one way or another. So we want to learn to accept it, embrace it, and most importantly, strategize it, not just let it run us over. Otherwise, we become the victim. And truth be told, those who beat the odds, those who are truly extraordinary, all experience it. So if you are experiencing it, meaning you are truly extraordinary.